Okay, so we're dedicating this morning's shir to Neshama of Leib ben Shmuel. Got that right. The yard site is today. Okay, we're 90A, Tzaddik Amud Aleph, just after the Mishnah. Okay, so the Mishnah stated, and we discussed this at length yesterday, how every Jew, the way we learned it, is given that every Jew performs mitzvahs in his life. So the Gemara declares, even the sinners of Israel, Malay and mitzvahs kadimin, are full of mitzvahs like the pomegranate, and therefore every Jew has a share in the building of this world and making it in its perfect state, right? Each mitzvah brings godliness into this world, which culminates in the coming of Mashiach, as described over the last two classes, in this Hasidic understanding of Mashiach being the evolved state that the world gets to in its perfection over the millennia of Jews doing mitzvahs. So every Jew, having contributed to that, is therefore part of the resurrection to experience the net result of what they've been doing. But then the Mishnah listed a few exceptions. And the Gemara is not going to analyze some of these exceptions. Exceptions of one who's not part of it. And the first and foremost is the one who denies the fact that the resurrection of the dead is from the Torah. Now, Torah itself doesn't explicitly state that there will be resurrection of the dead in Mashiach's coming, but it's implied. And as Rashi tells us in his commentary on the Mishnah, that's the big reason, or that's a big part of the reason why the one who denies resurrection of the dead not just denies its existence, but denies that it comes from Torah, meaning to say, even if he believed in it, but didn't believe it came from Torah, would also be a problem. Because that would mean he's undermining the very manner in which we study Torah, and that we rely on a Messiah, a tradition, going back to Moshe Rabbeinu, going back to Hashem, of how to interpret the verse. And denying that Tchisa Mesim comes from the Torah means to deny the interpretive power of Torah, which is a whole section of Torah you're denying. So it's not just denying the resurrection, but denying it's coming from the Torah. So the Gemara is going to get to analyzing where in the Torah do we have the implication for the resurrection, even though it's not stated explicitly. Meaning the 5 books of Moshe, and not just the prophets, which talk about it later. Clear on where we are? But before, the Gemara says like this. So it's, right, sorry? Just after the Mishnah, you see the big words on the bottom of the page, right? It's the next chapter, it's the bottom of the page. The Gimel Mem means the Gemara, end of the Mishnah, and then the Gemara. And the Gemara is like this, V'kol kach lama. Why to such an extent? So he denied the resurrection. So we're not going to give it to him just because he denied it. The Gemara's question is beautiful. The Gemara's question is not how do you know this, which is often the case. But the way the Gemara phrases the question is like Kol Kach Lama, is like, come on, because he doesn't know about it, and he's denying it because for ignorance or for whatever reason, we're going to cut him out. Like the Gemara is almost hoping not to cut the person out. So Kol Kach Lama, so far we're taking it, we're not going to give him the share in the world to come. We're not going to give him resurrection. So the Gemara explains why that is. Just pointing out the Gemara's phraseology, the question is unique. The Gemara doesn't usually ask it in this way. Usually the Gemara asks, Minayan, how do you know this? Or my time, or what's the reason? The Gemara here, Kol Kach Lama, almost sounds like a protest. Why so far? But the Gemara has to reconcile why it is so far. And this the Gemara says, Tana, we've learned, and I should also put in parentheses now, since some of you aren't here, we mentioned yesterday the Rambam, which says that obviously someone does teshuvah, he's back in the fold, and we quoted the Rambam elsewhere, which says that nobody knows what's going on in the heart of anybody else. So it's not for anybody here to judge and say this person doesn't believe he's not getting. But the Gemara is nonetheless setting the standard, even though it's not for us to apply to any one individual. At any rate, so Tana we learned, I have to make that caveat every time, just because otherwise people get this idea that we're cutting people out left, right. God forbid. It's our objective to include as many people as we can. We also mentioned yesterday that we have the permission to make the statement all Jews get the share of the world to come unqualified. Even though the Mishnah goes on to exclude people who don't get the world to come, we have permission to make the statement unqualified. How is that? Because every Shabbos, when we learn Perek Yavis, Ethics of Our Fathers, we quote this Mishnah before Kol Yisrael Yesh Lem Chelek Lem Haba, without giving the qualification of who doesn't get it. So we have permission to quote it in and of itself and say all Jews get it. There's qualifications and exclusions in the Gemara. Okay, fine, the Gemara will exclude people, but we don't have to That's not the banner we have to be running around. But nonetheless, since we're learning the Gemara, we're going to read through it, of course. Okay. Tana, the Gemara explains in answering why we're taking it so far. Who kafar b'tchias hamesim? He, this individual, denied the resurrection. Therefore, therefore he doesn't get the resurrection. Why? Because all of the measures of Hashem, midah connect midah, are measure for measure. And as we explained here in our intro class on Friday, that reward and punishment, at least in the way Hasidic sees it, and other views, is not God's being spiteful. God forbid. You denied it, you don't get it. And it's not God's being apathetic either, but rather reward and punishment, as we explained, is the reality that is the living out the reality we created, and therefore in our denial of something, we've created a reality that excludes that something, and thus no share in it. Not, God forbid, in spite. And the Gemara we're going to learn actually illustrates this point quite. The Gemara is proof, for how we know that God's actions are measure for measure, and that the reality we create is the reality we live. The Gemara's story that the Gemara is going to his site actually makes this point quite well, and I'm going to point it out as we go along. Sorry, we clear on this? Makes this point. It's not God, imposing a punishment on you because you did something wrong, but rather you living out the reality you create.
By your own doing.
By your own doing. In other words, it's not like, it's correct. Hashem created the world in such a way that we live out we've been given the capacity to create our realities, and that's either our reward or our punishment, depending on the reality we create for ourselves. And the story the Gemara is about to tell us, to prove this point, is going to bear that out if we listen, pay attention to the details, as we shall point out as we go along. So Amar Shmuel bar Nachmani, for Shmuel bar Nachmani said, Amar Rabbi Yonasan and Rabbi Yonasan, Minayin, from where do we know that all God's measures are midah connected, midah measure for measure? As the verse reads, this is the story in the book of Kings describing a siege of Jerusalem, which the Jewish people laid siege in reclaiming Jerusalem, which they had lost. And the pasuk says like this: Elisha, and Elisha the prophet says, standing outside the walls of the city.
I think it's in the northern kingdom.
Sorry?
It's in the northern kingdom.
We sure?
Yeah. It's a siege of Aram.
Bishar Shomron, yeah, so you're right. It's not Jerusalem. Yeah. So it's a siege of?
It's probably...
I guess it's Shomron.
Yeah, the capital.
Okay, my apologies. A different, not the capital of the southern kingdom, the capital of the northern kingdom. Yeah. At any rate, they're laying siege to a city. Let's put it that way. You want to pass the tissues, please?
Sure, yeah. It's the Melech Aram, yeah.
Sorry?
This will have Torah, by the way.
Yeah. Okay, my apologies on that. But let's just see the story.
This is the concept the same, doesn't change. Yeah.
Elisha tells the king who's inside the city, the king and his advisors. He's standing outside and he's hollering, I guess. He's telling them. I don't know, let's use the word hollering. He's calling out to them.
Oh, yeah.
And he says, Shimu Var Hashem, listen to the word of Hashem. Ka'es Macher, at this time tomorrow, Sa'a Soiles B'Shekel. No, because Shomron is where the wheat is being sold. It's not where the siege is. Anyway, I'm not really sure where the siege is. We'll look at the Stein Salzman, we'll see where it is. Anyway, Ka'es Macher Sa'a Soiles B'Shekel. At this time tomorrow, we'll be able to sell a saw, which is a measurement of flour, b'shekel for 1 shekel. Means it's quite cheap. Sasayim, and 2 measurers of sa'irim with barley, b'shekel for 1 shekel. Barley, generally speaking, is cheaper than wheat anyway. B'shar Shemron, the gates of Shemron. He's telling that to him, and telling him basically that his city is going to fall, and that people are going to run there to get food.
No, what's actually happened is the Aram came, and the foremost Aram came, and they saw the army had fled, and all their supplies were there. And that's what it became...
Sorry?
What happened was the Arameans sieged the city in a great famine.
Yeah.
And then what happened is their four Mitzrayim were out in the camp, and they said, either we're going to die in starvation, or we'll die by the Arameans. They went to the Aramean camp, and Hashem did a miracle, and he caused a great noise to come, commotion. The Arameans fled, and all their supplies were there. And they were able to take the supplies, and the food became... had the food of the army, all of the army was there.
Right, but it says they're buying it here.
Yeah, that's when people want to buy from the market, there'll be so much.
There'll be so much, it's very cheap.
Very cheap, exactly. It'll be like almost nothing because it's all
because you're going to
because the supplies of the non-Jewish army will leave all their stuff behind.
Okay. Point being, you're going to crumble unless food will be very cheap.
Yeah. And that's
So, V'ksiv, and the verse continues to read, Vayan hashalish asher melech neshen al yadai. Es ish Elokim, and the advisor upon which the king leans his hand, and the king himself didn't respond to the prophet, but the king's right-hand man, responds to the man of God, responds to Elisha, the prophet. Vayomer, he says, Hini Hashem oisar dubis b'shamayim. Is God going to make holes in the heavens? Hayeh davar zeh? Will this happen? Laughing him off, saying, we're here, we're strong, we're not losing our grain, we're not losing any of our supplies.
Actually, they were in famine. They said, how's it possible? We're
On the contrary, sorry, we have nothing. How are you saying it's all of a sudden becoming so cheap?
We're going to get the grain from it. We're in siege, and suddenly heavens go open up and open the grain.
Vayomer,
He said, yeah.
and the king says to him, Hinach ra, you're going to see beinech with your own eyes.
You're
You're going to see, the prophet responds and says, you're going to see with your own eyes that food's going to become in abundance, and everybody's going to become running to go get it. But Misham loy seichel, but you won't eat it. Since you're laughing it off, you're not going to eat, even though everybody else is going to be enjoying it. Even later the verse reads, Vayiloi Canaan, indeed so happened, and the food was so plentiful and available that everybody went running to go get it. And they trampled over him at the gate, and he died. So he didn't get to enjoy of the food that he was just promised would be available, because he laughed it off. So there it goes. He laughed off the food not existing, and therefore he got punished without getting that food. Measure for measure. This is the Gemara's point. But let's just see how the Gemara frames this. You with me so far? Says the Gemara, Dilma, perhaps Klolos Elisha Garmale. Maybe it was the curse of Elisha. Who said it was measure for measure? In other words, let's read this the way we've offered our interpretation here. Who says it's a reality that this person created by laughing it off? Maybe it's the fact that Elisha told him, you won't get it. So in other words, when a holy person, when a prophet curses you, that's not punishment in measure for measure, the reality you created. That's being imposed upon you by somebody else. So perhaps maybe this reality of him not getting the food, not because he laughed it off, because the prophet imposed that reality on him by cursing him. Right? Following?
Yes.
A more challenging statement.
No, what I'm thinking is something I read the last couple of days, that when you have to be careful on who you share your dream with, because what they're going to say as the interpretation is what's going to happen.
We're going to get that.
And it can come in two
That's very
ways.
interesting. Yeah, we learned about that in Brachas. It's a very good point. We're going to have something very similar in a moment.
I see the similarity coming already.
Yes.
I see it.
So the Amar Huda Marav, from Huda said in the Rav, Klilu Aschacham, the curse of a sage or of a scholar or of a person of divine stature. Afilu al chinam, even if he says it in passing, in happenstance, even if he doesn't say it, you shall be cursed with such and such. Hiba, it'll come to pass. So who says this is a reality that this person created by saying he won't get the food? Maybe it's because Elisha actually cursed him. Gemara says no. In Cain, if that's the case, Liktiv Kra, the verse should state, Misuhu, they trampled him by Yomos and he died. My Bashar, why do we have to say that he was trampled and died at the gate? He says the Gemara al Iske Shar. He died at the gate because of what he did at the gate, which is where he was standing when he laughed off Elisha. Meaning to say, the Gemara is telling us that when he died, it wasn't because some outside force imposed upon him a punishment for doing something foolish. No, it's because of what he did at the gate. He stood at the gate, laughing off the food becoming available, thus created a reality for himself where the food isn't available. And that's why he didn't get the food. So here we see the story, and the Gemara's analysis of the story bears out not just that. In other words, I would put it this way: if my interpretation is not correct, then who cares if it's a curse from the other guy? It's still measure for measure. So what if it's a curse from Elisha? It's still measure for measure. Your curse is what you did. The Gemara is challenging the idea of a curse by telling us that the measure for measure, perhaps, is not just a matter of some outside force imposing upon you a curse, be it Hashem or be it the prophet, whatever it is, but rather because of what he did at the gate. He scoffed, he laughed off the food becoming available, so thus he created his own reality as such. And from here we learn and this is kind of to your point, a person needs to be very careful with the words they choose to say. we have the capacity to create our own reality, and thus the words we utter, and keeping it positive, keeping it good, helps to create a positive and good reality. As we know, the Rebbe would exert much effort into keeping all of his words positive and upbeat, to the point that the Rebbe did not like the fact that in Israel they refer to hospitals as Bet Cholim. Bet Cholim literally translates as house of the sick. The Rebbe didn't like that. The Rebbe used to refer to it as Bet Refuah, house of healing. Just to have a positive take on everything, and many such examples like that. You don't want to create the reality.
Beit Chaim, for example.
Exactly, we refer to a cemetery not as a. It is referred to as a basic work, but it's also referred to as Beis Chaim, a house of the living. That's kind of not euphemistically. What's the word? Where you say something meaning the opposite. Euphemism. But here, with Bet Refuah, it's not just a euphemism. It's two ways of saying the same thing. There are people sick in the hospital, and those people getting better in the hospital. But which way do you look at it? Which way do you describe it? So when you're going to this hospital, you want to use words that imply what you want out of the hospital. You don't want to call it a place you're going to get sick. You're going to get better there. So call it that way. Create that reality of positivity and goodness. Similar idea? Yeah. Okay. So here the Gemara now this is the Gemara concludes that while the one who denies resurrection of the dead is not part of it, because in doing so, it's measure for measure, in that he created his reality that doesn't include the resurrection of the dead, unless he's not part of it, of course, unless there's teshuvah, unless Hashem has some other calculation that he decides for whatever reason. Okay.
Probably also include
yeah, so I said reality. The Gemara doesn't say someone who doesn't believe in the resurrection. Someone who denies the resurrection, meaning he understands it, learnt it, but decided no. As opposed to someone who never heard of anything, I don't think he's part of this category. I don't know. At any rate, yeah. So now let's see the Gemara. Now the Gemara is going to try to bring some proofs. Where indeed are the indications in the Gemara, in the Torah, that there's resurrection, right? Because the Gemara, that's the Gemara's qualification here. One who denies that resurrection comes from the Torah. So we have to find in the Torah where it talks about resurrection. And as I said, it's not implicit. It's not explicit there. It's implicit. So where is it implicit? Rabbi Yochanan says. Now the words Amar Rabbi Yochanan is in parentheses, and it's significant, which we'll talk about in a moment. Why it's in parentheses. For those that take it out, and perhaps we'll find out why. Rabbi Yochanan says, how do we know, or from where do we derive that there's resurrection of the dead from the Torah, if it's not explicitly there? So this is the Gemara. Shneimar, as the verse reads, Hashem commands the Jewish people with respect to giving the proper gifts to the Kohen when you shall get to the land. And the Gemara says, the pasuk says like this: "V'nasatem imanu," and you shall give of your grain, Trumas Hashem, the donation for Hashem, la'aron hakohen, to Aaron the Kohen. So the Gemara asks, "V'chi Aaron lo'olam kayim?" Does Aaron live forever? He didn't enter the land. He died before Jews entered the land of Israel. So what does this mean? The pasuk is saying that when you get to the land of Israel, you'll give it to Aaron.
To his children.
The pasuk says.
That's right. That's a pshat, but the
pasuk doesn't say so. And the implication here is that Aaron at one point will be able to receive your truma. And therefore the Gemara says, Elam Lamed, he never entered the land of Israel to be capable of receiving the truma. Elam Lamed, the pasuk is writing it this way, so that you can derive implicitly that Aaron will indeed return and live. And Jews will give him truma, give him the proper tithe. You can from here. Here you have the implication of the resurrection of the dead from the Torah. Okay, another simple implication. Torah says you give it to Aaron. Aaron never makes it there, which means one day he will make it there. Thus the resurrection of the dead. Okay, now take this text here. Now this is part of a great sugya in the Rebbe's Torah, in Chassidus in general, and in the Rebbe's Torah specifically, in which there is a Gemara in Nida, famous Gemara in Nida, which discusses whether shrouds that a person is buried in, And there, the Gemara says like this. Begech of so top left. We'll understand this by understanding details in the discussion in the Gemara Nida with respect to Mitzvot P'teres L'asad Lavai, which means there's a discussion in Nida about whether or not when Mashiach comes, or at least post-resurrection, we will have mitzvahs, we'll have commandments, and there is an opinion there, which we'll learn about in a second, which is Rabbi Yochanan, that there won't be mitzvahs in the future. Now Chassidus explains, what does it mean there won't be mitzvahs? There won't be mitzvahs in that the divine energy will be so prominent during the time of the resurrection that the divine energy invested in mitzvahs will be like nothing in comparison. And the famous example is Shraga B'Tiara, like when you're holding a little flame and the sun is shining, what does your flame do for you? Nothing. So your flame is like...
The good is going to outweigh the bad.
Not just the good is going to outweigh the good. The over good of Mashiach's coming will outweigh the good that the mitzvah brings.
Right. Yeah.
Not outweigh the bad, outweigh the other good. You're holding a candle, it gives you light. But the light that the candle provides for you is nothing when you have a massive, when you have the sun shining. So the mitzvah is like the candle. The divine energy of Mashiach's time is like the sun. And therefore it renders the little candle nothing. Not that the mitzvah won't exist, but the mitzvah will be bottle, will be like, even the halachim would use the word bottle. Bottle means nullified. But when you use the term halacha and nullified, it doesn't mean the thing doesn't exist. But it's nullified by that which is greater than it. So a little bit of non-kosher food falls into a big pot of kosher food, it's nullified.
Right.
Did the non-kosher food disappear? No. It actually enlarged the size of your kosher food. But it's become nullified to the greater number. Are you following?
Comes drowned out.
Drowned out, that's correct, that's the right word, drowned out. So the mitzvah, which is a divine energy, is drowned out by the intense divine energy of Mashiach's coming. But, says there, but it doesn't satisfy the halachic implication. Because as we'll learn in a moment, the halachic implication of the mitzvahs being bottle when Mashiach comes is that you're allowed to bury someone in shrouds that are made of shatnez. Shatnez are clothing that's made of wool and linen, and it's a prohibition against wearing such clothing. And according to the opinion which says that when Mashiach comes, there's no mitzvahs, you're allowed to bury someone like that. Now, if the meaning is that the mitzvahs will still be there, but they're going to be drowned out, then how could you bury someone in shrouds that are made of shatnez? Because he's going to return in the clothing that he was buried, presumably. Clear on the question?
Can you repeat it? Sorry.
The Gemara, the Sugya, let's learn the Sugya here. Beged of Berkalayim, a beged, a clothing that's made of, that has kalayim, that has shatnez, that has wool and linen. You can make for it the shrouds for the dead. You can bury someone in shrouds that are made of wool and linen, even though you're not allowed to wear it, because he's dead. He says, mitzvahs, why not?
Okay.
Right? Omer Rav Yosef says, you're implying by saying that you're allowed to bury someone in shrouds that's made of wool and linen, that there won't be any mitzvahs when Mashiach comes, because this guy's going to be resurrected with his clothing on, and his clothing are clothing that are forbidden to wear, and yet you're saying it's okay. Right? And therefore, the Hasidic explanation seems to fail. Because the Hasidic explanation, which says, then what does it mean when we say there's not going to be any mitzvahs in the future? It doesn't mean that they won't be there, but they'll be drowned out, which means they'll still be there. But the divine energy that mitzvah brings pales in comparison to the divine energy of Mashiach's coming, which would mean you cannot wear shatnez. Are you following what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right? It means the Gemara seems to apply literally no more mitzvahs. You can wear shatnez, you can wear prohibited clothing. Whereas the Hasidic explanation doesn't say that. The Hasidic explanation says that there will be mitzvahs, but it's going to pale in comparison. Right? So we have to understand this. And this the Gemara spells it out. Abaye says that when it says you're allowed to put him in shrouds that are made of shatnez, made of forbidden clothing, it's only with respect to in the time when you are mourning him and eulogizing him. That is to say, during the funeral of a cover usher, but once he's buried, you have to remove that shroud. On Marley, so he responded, "Lot it marla." Not true, because Amr Rabbi Yochanan says, "Afilu l'kover," you can even bury him in shrouds that are made of shatnez, forbidden clothing. Rabbi Yochanan Taimei, and Rabbi Yochanan follows his own logic. Rabbi Yochanan says, what's the meaning of the verse which says, B'meisim chavshi, when a person is dead, he is free. What does the verse mean? Kivin shemeis, the moment the person dies, nasa chavshi min mitzvahs, he becomes free of mitzvahs, and therefore he remains free even during resurrection. And thus he is allowed to wear forbidden clothes when he arises.
Today, when we bury somebody, when we put them into a coffin,
yeah,
are they clothed or not?
Wearing shrouds.
Wrapped in a talus.
Shrouds, yeah.
The special shrouds you buy. They're fancy ones.
Yeah.
The regular ones.
Buy regular ones, you don't need fancy.
Yeah, $1,500 is the cloth. And then
Okay,
also
so
they tell us as well.
Okay.
We
would have a lot of time, but let's go through this. So L'chor Talmud, there seems to be the big question seems to come, and this is where our Gemara fits in. Contradiction.
Mitzvahs.
We're going to get that in a second. Yeah. Time of Rabbi Yochanan. But before we even get to the contradiction, now the Gemara asks the question on that very Gemara. Time of Rabbi Yochanan. The Rabbi Yochanan's logic for why you're allowed to bury him in shrouds of shatnez. Given shemeis, because the moment the person dies, the person dies, Naisa Chav Mitzvahs becomes free of mitzvahs. Mahani only works. She calls Manshu Meis, so long as he's dead, Ain't Allah Mishum Isser Klayim, he doesn't have the prohibition of wearing shatnez, and therefore he can wear those shrouds. Avaloi Mahani, but seemingly doesn't work, Lizman Sha'achar Tchiyah, for the time after his resurrection. In other words, the verse you quoted, Rabbi Yochanan, to prove that you're allowed to bury him in shatnez, is that when he's dead, he's free of mitzvahs. What about when he comes back?
Well, you said before, he remains free.
Right,
So
but your verse doesn't imply that. This is that we have to learn the verse, right? Kishiyam Babusha, when he gets up in his clothing, Shenikva Behem, which he was buried in, which seemingly, why not? The prohibition against wearing shatnez returns upon him. The Kivin Shekin, that's the case. The reason that Rabbi Yochanan finds, which says that when a person is dead, he's free of mitzvahs, does not satisfy Rabbi Yosef's statement, which is that when a person returns, there's no mitzvahs for him. In other words, his verse that he quotes, even though I just told you that it means that from the moment he's dead, it stays with him, that's not what the verse explicitly states. The verse only says that when you're dead, you're free of mitzvahs. Fine, when you're dead, you're free of mitzvahs. And when you return, may the mitzvahs come back. Question number one.
Some explain that.
Many people ask this question. They're not the first one to ask this question, but we're going to learn that as interpretation.
The dead means even when he comes back, he's still in the category.
But we need to understand that.
That's one way.
We need to understand that. We need to understand that. And we're going to get that. Now, moreover, and this is the question from our Gemara, the Stira. In the Sugya, in the Gemara where it discusses the resurrection, which is the Gemara we just learned this morning. Amra Bechna says, how do you know Tchias Mesim is in the Torah? Shenemar is the verse. Read what did we learn this morning? How do we know that Tchias Mesim is in the Torah? From what?
Because Aaron is going to return
to give him the truma,
to receive.
And that's a mitzvah.
There's a mitzvah, exactly. There's no mitzvahs. You can't
So
give
he
it to
does receive.
So there is a mitzvah.
mitzvah.
Contradiction,
Yeah.
which is why I said, you see here that the boards are Amar Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan says it is in parentheses. That those who say take it out, because Rabbi Yochanan in the other Gemara said there's no mitzvahs in the future time. Mashiach comes, and here we're saying to plot there is mitzvahs because we're giving Aaron the truma, which is why in our Gemara, look at the print in our Gemara, the words Amar Rabbi Yochanan said it is in parentheses because there are those who take it out. There are those who take out those three words and say the statement unqualified. That's saying Rabbi Yochanan speaking. Because Rabbi Yochanan is the one speaking here, and that's a condition to Rabbi Yochanan there. But if you take out the words Rabbi Yochanan, okay, no contradiction. Someone else is speaking. But anyway, our Gemara does say Rabbi Yochanan, so it will be much better if we can reconcile the contradiction.
So he's making seemingly a contradictory.
That's correct.
Point. Okay.
And he goes on to say, like, the V'nostam, so Rabbi Yochanan says, how do you know? Because the Pasuk said, "Not in the middle, Aaron you will give your truma to Aaron." And the Gemara asks, Aaron la'olam kayim, is Aaron going to live forever? But seemingly he never entered the land of Israel to even get the truma. And this teaches you that he's going to return. And he will get his truma. So from this Gemara, it's clear. From our Gemara, the Gemara we learned this morning, Rabbi Yochanan is of the opinion that there is no mitzvah, that mitzvahs will not be nullified when Mashiach comes. Why? Because we will fulfill the mitzvah of giving truma even after Mashiach, even after the resurrection, and we'll give it to Aaron. If so, how could Rabbi Yochanan say that even to bury the person, you can bury him in shatnez? When he gets up wearing his clothing, he's going to be wearing shatnez. So number one, the verse you stated Question number one, the verse you stated only talks about the dead, not the resurrection. Number one. Number two, it's a contradiction. Here you're saying after the resurrection you are giving truma. There is mitzvahs. And there you're saying you can bury him in shatnez because there's no mitzvahs. So which one is it?
But right now we can't bury him like that. Can we?
Rabbi Yochanan is saying you couldn't. You can. Because he's dead, he has no mitzvahs. And he returns, presumably he also has no mitzvahs.
But when we do bury, we don't bury people with...
No, we don't do that. I don't think we use shatnez. But Rabbi Yochanan's view is you're allowed to. We're taking his view. We're not looking at halacha now. We're learning his view.
Okay. Right.
Okay. Now the Rebbe's answer here is mind blowing, and we need to focus because there's it's quite subtle. I don't want to.
I'm sorry. This is from where?
Okay, so this is I should say this. This is the Rebbe's talk from the year 1992. It's a combination of his talk on Rosh Hashanah and Sukkot. This is, for those who want to look it up, it's in Sefer Sichos Tafshin and Beis, page 30 and 31, and it's part of a greater talk on this discussion about mitzvahs in the future time when Mashiach comes. So let's see. The Yishleim might suggest, should Rabbi Yochanan, when the Gemara says that Rabbi Yochanan follows his logic, which says that Kivin Shemeis, that the moment a person dies, Nasachav Shem Mitzvah becomes free of mitzvahs. Quoting the verse which says that when a person dies, he's free, right? Which we asked earlier seems to imply only when he's dead and not when he returns. The verse is like this: no, who gam bir. It's also an explanation. The hesber and logic. The divid of Yosef, so the words of Rabbi Yosef, which said earlier, mitzvahs will be nullified in the future time. In other words, when Rabbi Yosef said that mitzvahs will be nullified in the future time, Rabbi Yochanan qualifies that by saying that the moment you die, you are free of mitzvahs. What does that mean? Let's explain this. Perek means to say, mitzvahs, listen very carefully because it's very subtle. Mitzvahs b'tes asad lavoi. When we say that mitzvahs will be nullified in the future time, einay ella is only b'negeya to hatzivur la'adam, the commandment to the person. Mitzvahs daika. Mitzvah specifically. Shegidram, that the meaning of a mitzvah is Hutzivur la'adam is a commandment to man. When I say commandment, I'm applying two separate entities: God, the person, and a communication from God to the person. And that is what ceases to be when Mashiach comes. That communication. Let's further understand this. Shekivin shemeis adam. The moment the person dies, after concluding his service in this world, bekim mitzvahs, in the fulfillment of his mitzvahs, nasa adam, the person becomes chafshim min mitzvahs, free of mitzvahs. Not that mitzvahs stop existing. The mitzvah in and of themselves continue to exist. The person is free of them, but the mitzvahs still exist. Hainu meaning to say, shegam ba'olam matchia, even in the world of the resurrection, post-resurrection, la'achag mar ma'aseinu v'avadeseinu, after fulfilling our work, became a mitzvah meshach hazman, of not just me as an individual, I passed on because I finished my work, but the whole entire history of Jews finished their work, which is why we're at the Messianic age with the resurrection. The hayom la'asosam of the time when we have to work and serve Hashem, which is our exile. Ein alav tzivoy dekima mitzvahs. We do not have the commandment to fulfill mitzvahs. Aval mitzias and mitzvahs, but the existence of mitzvahs as an independent being, k'shala'atzma on its own, he bekiyim mitzvahs forever, which is the question that I asked before we even began our whole discussion. How could someone possibly say that mitzvahs will stop being when Mashiach comes? The famous words of the Rambam, that it's a foundation of our faith, that our Torah and our mitzvahs stay forever. How could Rabbi Yochanan come and say it's gone when Mashiach comes? The whole thing doesn't hold. Never mind all the inner contradictions, in that it contradicts the fact that we're giving truma to Aaron, and the verse only says the dead, not post resurrection. The fundamental. How could you possibly state that mitzvahs won't exist? Isn't God eternal? Isn't His mitzvahs eternal? So there was answers by saying mitzvahs stay. The being of tefillin still exists. My commandment doesn't exist. It's very subtle. We'll crystallize in a moment. Mitzvah, according to the Rambam, mitzvah stands forever and ever. Not as a commandment to man, but rather as exists as God's will. God's will for mitzvah stays forever. The commandment to me stops to exist. Let's Let's explain this. What does it mean the commandment to man stops existing, but the divine will for the mitzvah stays? The last paragraph in the right-hand column. Haggadah the mitzvahs. The meaning of a mitzvah, tzivur la'adam, commandment to a man, shayach is only possible rak under the circumstance, kasha adam, one man, who metzias tifnei atzmai, is an independent being. As I explained, commandment implies a commander and the person receiving the commandment as separate entities, and the communication between the two of them. There's God, there's me, and God communicates to me through His Torah commandment. Sha'az, then, when a person is an independent being, then the commandment from God can apply on him that he has to behave in accordance to the will of Hashem. When we come to the time when a person concludes his service of Hashem, his service of mitzvahs, either after he dies or collectively after Mashiach comes, when a person's entire entity, every detail of his, chadura, is permeated with the will of Hashem, V'nasa, and he becomes in such a circumstance, shel tzafsa, of unity. Mitzvah, the word mitzvah, Malash and Tzafsa, comes from the word unity or connection or bond. V'chibur, and connection of HaKadosh Baruch Hu with Hashem. At shenasas mitzim echad, to the point that me and God become one entity. So there's no commandment. Commandment implies I'm separate from God who's commanding me. But if I'm one with Hashem, what does it mean commandment? God's commanding Himself? An extension of Himself? If a Jew is an extension of God, then there's no commandment. Because commandment implies otherness. Yisrael, the Jew, through his service of Torah in this world, now became one with Hashem. And that's going to be lived out when Mashiach comes. So, you cannot say there's a commandment to the person. The person is not a separate entity. Because it's not a separate entity. The person will be a living expression of God's desire. And therefore, automatically, he lives out mitzvahs. The mitzvah through the mitzvahs. Therefore puts in the footnote, similar to the fact that the physical world will call out that Shabbos is here. What does it mean? The world is, when Mashiach comes, is so in sync with the divine will that it doesn't need a commandment from Hashem to tell it, go do what I asked you. It automatically lives out the mitzvahs. So now we can reintroduce the Hasidic explanation as it explains in the footnote and in the next side.
So it doesn't mean that the mitzvahs don't exist. They're there, but they're automatically...
automatic. That's correct.
Integrated.
That's correct.
Done.
They're automatically being done without even being commanded. Because we are just a living extension of divine will. And now we can get back to the Hasidic explanation. The Hasidic explanation for what means that it'll be nullified, not that they stop existing, but that they become pale in comparison to divine unity. Meaning to say, the divine truth is so overwhelmingly there that everything automatically lives in that way. And that's what it means it's batal, it's nullified. In that it's not, meaning to say, the commandment element is nullified. God commanding you. And therefore, what happens if you bury the person in forbidden clothing? The moment he gets up, he will automatically, without even being conscious of it, shed that clothing. And therefore, why not bury him? And why not bury him in shrouds that are forbidden? He won't anyways have to take them off when he gets up, because he's going to be so in sync with divine will, it'll automatically happen.
So it's
isn't this beautiful?
It's sort of like, even though it's not a mitzvah to, let's say, breathe, we naturally breathe.
It's correct.
So when the Mashiach comes,
our mitzvah is natural as breathing.
As natural as breathing.
That's correct. And you won't have to be conscious about it. It's going to happen automatically. All you're going to be is a living extension of divine will.
Right. So
today,
we're not going to say, "Oh, I got to run to shul to go put on tefillin and davin." We just automatically,
exactly,
as we're breathing.
Exactly.
Like robot.
Not like robots.
No.
Robots mean that we don't think. This is different. This is we're a living, breathing extension. And the truth is to some degree we don't have the Yetzer Hara, so it means to some degree we don't have the same free choices that we have today. In fact, there's a Hasidic saying which is somewhat in tongue-in-cheek, but it's also true, that when Mashiach comes, we're going to miss the days of exile. Because we'll miss the time when we can struggle to serve Hashem. When Mashiach comes and no struggle to serve Hashem, it's automatic.
Right.
Because that's you're breathing like a robot. No, but you breathe because you're a human being, and human being breathe. So you put on mitzvahs because you're a Jew, extension of Hashem, you put on mitzvahs. You have no struggle for it.
It's the free will.
So the free will is still there, but it's so overwhelmed by divine truth that there is nothing else. There is nothing else but divine will. There's nothing else consciously, not subconsciously, not in the world around you, not in your own being. It's all divine truth. It's an amazing, amazing, beautiful idea. And this is so classic.
What I said, though, the good outweighs the bad, where there's so much good in the world, where the bad, sort of like what you said before with the
bad
non-kosher food going into kosher food.
That's correct.
Kosher food overwhelms the non-kosher food, making everything kosher.
Exactly.
So the good outweighs the bad.
Exactly. So everything in our lives are so overwhelmed by divine truth that it ends up becoming nothing other than divine truth.
Right.
And this is so classic Rebbe, where the Rebbe takes a Hasidic explanation, which seems to contradict the halachic reading, and someone else could have left it. Okay, this is a Hasidic explanation, this is a halachic explanation. But the Rebbe connects the two. At the Hasidic explanation, which tells you that the reason why mitzvahs are nullified is because they are subsumed in divine truth, even works out halachically. And that we are so consumed by divine truth that we don't even need to be commanded to do anything. And that's what it means when mitzvahs will be nullified in the future. Not that the mitzvah will stop existing, but the element of command will stop existing. Because command implies me and God are separate gods commanding me. And that's not the case when Mashiach comes. We are a living extension of divine will, and they fulfill it automatically. So getting back to our Gemara, it's not a contradiction to the fact that you're wearing shatnez when you're buried. Because when Mashiach comes, we're automatically going to be giving Truma to Aaron as a natural state. And if we get up and we happen to be wearing shatnez, we'll automatically shed it because we are living extensions of divine will and divine purpose. May this day happen without delay.
Amen.
This is